Within just a few hours after the United States and Israel launched a sudden war against Iran, people immediately noticed something unusual. No one could answer the simple question, why? Why did they start this war? Over the course of a single night, the United States and Israel began attacking targets inside Iran. The Department of War launched Operation Epic Fury, weakening Tehran's leadership by eliminating Iran's top leader. Their navy is being crushed. Together with the United States, we will strike the terrorist regime hard. And when they started to give explanations, their answers contradicted each other. Some people thought that maybe they were hiding the real reason. Or maybe there really was no clear reason and Donald Trump just did it on impulse. But I studied this for a long time, and I don't think that's the answer. I think the real reason for this war, which has already claimed hundreds of innocent lives, brought down the global economy, and sparked chaos in the Middle East, is messier and more complicated than what we usually think about how wars begin. If we look into this closely, we'll better understand why war really happens. And this also reveals some uncomfortable truths about how wars really start in the world, how they are formed, how this war came to be, and where it is headed. But before we start, if you're new to our channel, please subscribe so you'll always be updated with videos like this. We will use this board to answer the questions that can't be answered or are not being answered by those who planned this war. What kind of war is this? What is its purpose? This also includes the question of who pushed the events toward war to achieve that goal, and where this will lead Iran. What does the expected outcome look like? Let's start with the answer we often hear from Trump himself. For example, in an interview a few hours after the war began, he said that what they did in Venezuela was the perfect model for Iran. What he meant was to replace the leadership of Iran with a new leader who would be more allied with the United States. All right, let's consider Venezuela as the target outcome, and let's go back to what happened there. The relationship between the US and Venezuela has been tense for a long time. Later that January, almost out of nowhere, Trump launched a special forces raid to capture the president of Venezuela, who is Nicolas Maduro and his wife. But, and this is important, this is not regime change. The entire political system of Venezuela was not changed. It remained instead. Maduro's vice president took over and even made some limited trade deals with Trump. There are even indications that he might have been involved in the plan. A few months before the incident, the Miami Herald reported that he secretly offered Trump help to replace Maduro. Again, that's not regime change. Regime change is the overthrow of the entire political system. In Venezuela, the ideology and the people in power are still the same. Only the face at the top has changed. So we will call the goal of the war leadership change. Just replacing the leader without changing most of the system in Iran. Trump keeps saying this over and over that he wants to do it. He said there's a plan, and he points to Venezuela. How would that work? It's very simple. It will work just like what happened in Venezuela. And as expected, at the very start of the war, American and Israeli airstrikes already took out Iran's top leader. Now, Trump is saying that he wants to personally choose the next leader of Iran, and he already has 3 options in mind. The question of who is pushing this strategy is actually quite easy to answer, because as we will see, many powerful people are involved in the outbreak of this war. But only one person openly says that the model is Venezuela, and that's Donald Trump himself. And the clearest answer as to why Trump wants this, why he sees this model as the goal of the war, actually came from one of his close allies who tried to stop him, Tucker Carlson.
So I called over there to see, called someone who knows him to see. I said, I'm just going to fly up anyway and tell him this because I think it's so important. And the person says, don't bother, because he's being shown polling that this war is like a 90-10 win for him.
The survey being referred to is probably from a pro-Trump group where it showed that his base had overwhelming support for the war. And even if the survey has bias or leading questions, that's not the most important thing. What's important is that it seems Trump supported the war against Iran because he thought it would be popular. And there's a reason why his approval ratings are low and his party is at risk of losing in the midterm elections. So it seems his plan was to quickly overthrow the leader of Iran, replace him with a new leader, and then leave right away. Just like what was done in Venezuela, but if you look at what's happening now, this isn't going to be quick. A 4-hour operation just to change a name and boost the president's ratings. And that's where everything gets strange. Trump is the leader of the country leading the war. But it seems like his version of it isn't really being followed. That's the first sign that something else is going on. Something else is happening behind everything. And now, we'll put together the whole picture to understand what it really is. This is the first sign that something unusual is happening here. And we'll put together the remaining parts of this board to find out what it really is. Let's start with another explanation that's a bit different from the previous one. The goal of this operation is to change the nature of the threat, not the regime. When this is over, no matter who leads Iran, they won't have any ballistic missiles left. That came from Lindsey Graham. According to him, the real goal of the war is to destroy Iran's military capability. This explanation also came out in some statements from the White House, like destroying their missiles, nuclear facilities, and warships. So what do we call this? Let's just say that destroying weapons is another goal of the war. This is a more limited type of war, and this has long been practiced in America's foreign policy. For example, in 1986, Ronald Reagan announced the attack on Libya's military assets.
At 7 o'clock for study, and now at this opportunity.
And in 1998, Bill Clinton ordered a similar operation against Iraq.
Earlier today, I ordered America's armed forces to strike military and security targets in Iraq.
You get the pattern, and Israel often does this too. So we'll use Iraq 1998 as a model, where Clinton bombed targets as a possible blueprint for Iran. Usually the result is a few destroyed military buildings, and this is already happening in Iran, like the base near Tehran. But if we want to understand why this is being done, the question is, who is pushing for this kind of war? One of the clearest answers comes from a report by the Washington Post, which says that the leader of Saudi Arabia secretly called Trump several times to urge him to attack Iran. The goal is to weaken Iran's military before it becomes even stronger. This means that one of the main proponents of this version of the war is the leader of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, or MBS. And Saudi Arabia hid their role because they didn't want to trigger a wider and prolonged war in the region that could harm them. But that's exactly what happened. Now, Iran has targeted ships in the Strait of Hormuz. Iran has also started laying mines.
Global price of oil skyrocketing. At least 6 ships targeted in the last 24 hours.
So how did it end up like this? A war that both leaders wanted to keep small and short suddenly grew bigger and worse. There's still one person we haven't heard from. This is Benjamin Netanyahu. In a speech on Israeli TV a week after the war began, he said he wanted to liberate Iran and that he had a plan to destroy or disrupt its entire political system and government. And this isn't new. He has been pushing for this for a long time. In 2002, while speaking before the US Congress, he said, "I want to see regime change in Iran, just like I want it to happen in Iraq." And last year, he even spoke to the Iranians, that if they overthrow their own government, Israel will help them. Even with their water problems, according to him, when your country becomes free, Israeli experts will come to bring modern technology to every city in Iran. So, for the third objective, we'll put Netanyahu there. But what do you call what he wants to happen? Since the war began, it's like he's playing with words. He says, "I'm not seeking regime change, but I'm just taking steps that just happen to possibly lead to regime change," which he has been asking for over 20 years. Now, let's talk about the term regime change. This is often confusing because it's not just about changing the leader. It's about destroying the entire political system of a country and replacing it with a new one that will follow what you want. Honestly, it's more like an occupation. It's similar to what the United States did to Germany and Japan in 1945, or to Iraq in 2003. Bad regime? Check. Free the country? Check. Bring freedom? Check. And who else has long been advocating for regime change? Back then in Iraq, I also quoted him. According to him, if you remove Saddam and his regime, I guarantee that it will have a huge positive effect on the entire region. But dismantling the entire political system of a country, that's not something you can just do easily. In Iraq, it took the US several years. They fought in every city to completely tear down the old system and build a new one. I'm not saying that's exactly the plan for Iran, but what's clear is that the outcome they want requires that level of destruction. And we're already seeing that now in Iran. So many police stations, government offices, and other parts of the state are being bombed. Here we can see how different objectives come together and how this has created the war we're seeing now. This is an interview with Lindsey Graham, the same senator who was earlier talking about the missiles. He said that he spent several months talking to Trump to push for this war against Iran. He even kept going back and forth to Israel to coordinate with Netanyahu and with Israeli intelligence on how to push Trump towards war. And according to reports from within Trump's own inner circle, Netanyahu said that the target should be Iran's missile program. And that was said to be the reason why Trump believed that the only step was to join that offensive. This was also confirmed by Trump's own Secretary of State. According to him, we knew that there was an upcoming action from Israel. We also knew that Iran might attack American forces in response. And if we didn't act first, the casualties would be greater. So this is unusual, isn't it? Netanyahu seems to have a broader objective, a kind of total system change, a major war. Meanwhile, Trump seems to just want a quick Venezuela-style operation. A quick ousting, a quick replacement, then leave. But what happened was, that wasn't the kind of war that took place. Instead, we ended up with the third option, bombing Iran's weapons. But even though this was how it started, the war quickly escalated. Listen to Lindsey Graham just a few days after he said the objective was limited. And it's true. It quickly got to the point where Trump wanted to pull back from the war. For him, it was like, is the job done? But the other side wasn't finished yet. Israel kept pushing the war because its goal to change the entire regime remained. That's where the bigger problem started. It's not just about different goals, it's about how war escalates once it starts to get worse. Think of war like a staircase. There are small skirmishes at the bottom, and there are bigger wars at the top. If everyone stays at the lower level, that's where it will remain. But if even one side escalates the level of violence, even little by little, everyone is forced to follow and go up as well. You can't bring a knife to a gunfight. That's why everyone rises to the same level of combat. This is what's called escalation dynamics. It's a force that's almost unstoppable once it starts. And this is where the last part of the board comes in, a bigger kind of war. This is Tehran. And the fires you see are from Israel's bombing of major oil refineries. Here's another angle. Israel also bombed several civil and power facilities in Iran, even with warnings from the US that this might backfire and further fuel the anger of civilians. Gasoline is even flowing through the roadside drains in Tehran. This kind of cutting off electricity and gasoline in Iran's largest city is not just simple damage. This causes severe hardship for 10 million people, while gradually weakening the entire system of the country, even if some parts of it have military value. Its direction is clear. This is not just about bombing a target. This is a step toward a deeper goal, the collapse of a functioning state. And that process has a name. State collapse. The closest example of this is in. And if you look at the map, you'll notice something. There are actually many countries surrounding Iran. I'm thinking, why are they developing so many weapons programs? And if we look back, in 2001, when the United States invaded Afghanistan to topple the government that harbored the masterminds of 9/11, it wasn't just the regime that was overthrown. What happened was the entire institution of the country collapsed, down to the village level. Gradually, it became a failed state. The result was hunger, displacement, chaos, and the collapse of law and government. In this kind of vacuum, extremist groups entered and filled the gap that was left behind. So the question is, why would Israel and the United States want the same thing to happen in Iran? Look at one of Trump's posts during the first week of the war. He said that Iran was shutting down international oil flows, which was damaging the economy of the US and the whole world. So he threatened to destroy Iran as a country, so it could never recover again. That is exactly what is called state collapse. So now the question is, who is behind this? Who are we going to put in this part of the board? The answer seems to be no one, despite Trump's strong statements on social media. There isn't a single clearly identifiable person within the system who openly says they want to turn Iran into a failed state. There might be people pushing from behind the scenes. That's possible, but there's an even scarier possibility that no single person is planning this, but it's still happening. Let's go back to this escalation ladder. State collapse is at the very top part of the escalation ladder. So when even a single country starts to climb in that direction, even just to intimidate, the other side is forced to follow. And that's where the unstoppable escalation of violence begins. So if we look at the whole picture, different kinds of wars are happening at the same time. Different goals, different interests, different people are pushing for it. But all of them are pulling Iran at the same time, leading to different possible outcomes of the crisis. And this is where the bigger point comes in. We want to think that war has one clear leader, one decision, one plan, one goal. But in reality, war is the product of a coalition of many actors, even within a single government. Different officials, different agendas, different fears, and different expected outcomes. And in the end, it's not a single direction controlled by just one person. Instead, it's a chaotic system, gradually pushing itself forward toward a more devastating war a few years ago. On the 20th anniversary of the Iraq War, I made a report where I asked historians why the war really happened. According to them, one thing is clear from all the evidence. There were many senior officials in the Bush administration, each with their own reasons for wanting the war. And even one of the main architects of the war, Paul Wolfowitz, even admitted that the agreed-upon mission of the war was to search for and destroy weapons of mass destruction. It was not because it was the most important thing, but because it was the only thing they could all agree on. In other words, even if not everyone believed it, or even if some knew that the information wasn't certain, that became the official reason for the war. One of the people involved in that decision, Richard Haas, later said, "It wasn't a single decision. It gradually formed like a tipping point. There was no exact moment when it was decided." And this is where the bigger truth comes in, which is more common than we think. Most of the time, wars are not the result of a clear order from one person with a single plan and a clear objective. Instead, they are the result of many decisions, many interests, and many people gradually pushing in the same direction until it just happens. This means that when we look at the war in Iran and ask who decided to start it, sometimes the answer is not a single person. Sometimes there isn't a single direct decision made in the way we think. And if there's no clear decision about why and what the war is for, then there really isn't any clear control either on how it will be fought or how it will end. And this is where another important lesson emerges. Wars that start for vague, mixed, or chaotic reasons often become endless wars. Even if any of the objectives seem like a good idea on paper, just like turning Iran into Venezuela, Iraq, or Afghanistan, you can't achieve that if you're trying to do everything at once, because in the end, you don't really accomplish anything. Instead, the situation just pulls you up the escalation ladder, leading to a bigger, messier, and more dangerous war. So war like this is not a simple or clear story of a single decision. It's messy, bureaucratic, and full of conflicting interests. And it's run by people who sometimes aren't even sure what they really want. And in the process, it can set off events that they can no longer control. The effects affect millions of lives and last for many generations. So, if we look at the war in Iran today, we notice even more that it doesn't have a clear objective. There is no single plan. There is no single direction. And it's possible that there is no single answer as to what all of this is really for. And maybe that's the hardest truth in this war.